They shot him, shattered every bone in his body, and burned him, yet he survived. On June 5, 1944, during World War II, just before Operation Overlord and Allied invasion of Normandy, northern France, a few planes carrying American paratroopers are sent ahead for a special mission. Their objective is to land behind enemy lines and demolish a tower atop a church in a small French village, which the Nazis are using for radio jamming. As the soldiers sit aboard the plane, most feel anxious, fully aware of how critical and perilous their mission is. The odds of survival are slim, but they are prepared to sacrifice themselves for the greater cause, defeating the Nazi regime and ending the war. Among them, Private Ed Boyce is the most nervous. He isn't built for war and was never a soldier. Just 3 months ago, he was tending his lawn, dreaming of the future. The draft changed everything. After basic training, Ed is now a soldier on his first mission, terrified not only of dying but also of harming someone. His fear makes him an easy target for ridicule. His fellow soldiers mock him for failing to hold a weapon properly or pose a real threat. The only one who remains composed is Corporal Ford, reassigned to their unit due to insubordination. Before entering enemy airspace, Sergeant Renson reminds the troops of their mission. Destroying the radio tower is the only way the landing can succeed. Without it, the Nazis will disrupt communications and sabotage troop coordination. Corporal Ford, the demolitions expert, is responsible for blowing up the church, but first, they must battle through hundreds of Nazis to reach it. As night falls, the planes approach Normandy but are immediately bombarded by anti-aircraft fire. The German defenses are stronger than expected, destroying most planes. Many soldiers are shot before they even parachute out, devastating morale. As they watch comrades die, the sergeant orders them to stay calm and jump only on the green light. As the light flashes, the first soldiers leap, but just then, anti-aircraft fire hits the plane's rear, tearing it apart. Some are trapped in a fiery death trap, but the sergeant helps Ed and a few others escape. In free fall, Ed sees bullets whizzing past and comrades perishing amid explosions. Losing orientation, he hastily pulls the ripcord, opening his parachute just before crashing. He lands in a river and nearly drowns but quickly cuts the straps, crawling to shore. As he checks his weapon and regains composure, German soldiers combing the forest spot him and open fire, forcing him to flee. Among the fallen bodies in the woods, Ed finds no survivors but picks up a rifle. Minutes later, he sees a surviving sergeant surrounded by 10 Nazis. Ed wants to help, but Corporal Ford stops him, covering his mouth. Ford knows the sergeant is doomed and insists they stay hidden to ensure his sacrifice isn't in vain. Reluctantly, Ed watches as the Nazis execute the sergeant before moving off to find more survivors. Ford suggests heading to the rally point to locate others. Hearing rustling nearby, they prepare for a fight only to find 3 more survivors, Privates Dawson and Tibbet, and photographer Morton Chase. Now 5, they push forward, discussing their hopes of surviving and returning to civilian life. But when they let their guard down, disaster strikes. Dawson steps on a landmine, suffering fatal injuries, while the others sustain minor wounds. Realizing they've entered a minefield, Ford carefully leads them out before the Nazis arrive. Soon, the 4 survivors reach a forest and wash up at a small pond. While Ford and Ed mourn the fallen, Chase and Tibbet stumble upon grotesque remains, an unidentifiable, otherworldly creature. Just then, they hear approaching footsteps and prepare to fire, only to discover a startled local French woman. She attempts to flee, but Ford orders them to stop her before she alerts the Germans. Ed tries to grab her first, but she resists and wounds him with a knife. Ford swiftly disarms her, urging her to calm down and talk. During questioning, Khloe reveals she is from a Nazi-occupied village nearby. To prove goodwill, Ford returns her knife and has Tibbet hand over their looted supplies. Though cautious, Khloe begins trusting Ed, who speaks French and appears kind. Soon, she leads them to her village, where she lives with her 8-year-old brother, Paul, and her gravely ill aunt. Ford, Chase, and Tibbet leave on a reconnaissance mission to verify her claims. Fearing for her family, Khloe follows, but her movement alerts a neighbor. The elderly woman, eager to gain Nazi favor, signals them, alerting soldiers of Khloe's curfew violation. Ed is forced to hide in a trench as the Germans approach and inspect her. Their search of her belongings and harassment of the young woman are interrupted by SS Hauptsturmführer Wner, who allows Khloe to return home. She lets the 4 American soldiers inside, giving them shelter as they prepare for their mission. Little Paul wants to play, irritating Tibbet, as their task is too critical to waste time. Khloe reveals her parents were executed, a fate that befalls many, as Nazi patrols inspect houses and kill those they deem undesirable without reason. She warns the soldiers not to stay long, and Ford assures her they will leave soon, as the Allied invasion begins that morning. Tensions rise among the group due to Ed's overly kind nature, seen as a liability in war. Once, he was ordered to kill a mouse but couldn't bring himself to do it, causing trouble with his superiors. This story touches Khloe, who sympathizes with Ed, a kind man forced into war. After sending Tibbet and Chase on another reconnaissance mission, Ford continues preparing explosives. Meanwhile, Ed goes downstairs and hears terrifying noises from Khloe's aunt's room. Peeking inside, he is horrified by the old woman's disfigured body. Khloe explains that she returned like this after being taken to the church by the Germans. Later, Paul, Ed, and Ford are forced to hide in the attic when a Nazi vehicle arrives. Wner visits Khloe, intending to force himself on her, but she refuses. He orders his men to search the house. Hearing noise upstairs, they investigate and find Paul. The boy steps out to protect the soldiers just as Wner offers Khloe a choice: either submit to him or let her brother be taken where her aunt was. To protect Paul, Khloe, in disgust, gives in to the SS officer. Unable to let this happen, Ed goes downstairs, aims his rifle at Wner, and Ford knocks him out before binding him. Hoping to move quickly, Ford sends Ed to find Tibbet and Chase. Searching for them, Ed nears the church and sees disfigured bodies being removed and burned. A dog attacks him, forcing him to flee. He catches up to a truck carrying corpses and hides beneath the bodies as it heads to the church. When the vehicle stops, he sneaks out and explores the underground facility. He discovers holes in the walls used for observing prisoners. Hiding as a scientist approaches, Ed watches as he forces a captive to obey. Looking closer, Ed is horrified the prisoner has lost all human traits. It becomes clear the church is not only a radio tower but also a secret laboratory where the Nazis conduct human experiments. Ed infiltrates the lab, finding people trapped in cocoons filled with an unknown liquid. In one room, he discovers a reddish serum and takes a syringe as a sample. Continuing his search, he sees a woman's severed head still speaking, along with other horrors. Among those being prepared for experimentation, Ed finds his fellow soldier, Jacob Rosenfeld. As the scientist enters, Ed hides and watches as the doctor injects a corpse with the red serum, reviving it. After placing the reanimated body into storage, the scientist leaves, giving Ed a chance to free Jacob by removing a spike from his organs. Surrounded by Nazis, the soldiers escape through the sewers, avoiding detection. Tibbet and Chase return to Khloe's house first, unaware of Ed's fate. Assuming the inexperienced soldier has fallen, they debate proceeding without him. Soon, Ed and Jacob arrive as well. While Jacob is treated for his injuries, Ed recounts what he witnessed and shows Ford the syringe of red serum. Eager to learn more about the underground lab, Ford turns to the captured German officer for answers. Wner remains silent, forcing Ford to use violence. He beats the officer, but Wner only speaks in riddles, claiming the lab gives people a new purpose and that their miserable lives finally gain meaning. Enraged and unable to control himself, Khloe lunges at Wner, stabbing him in the leg. Tibbet quickly intervenes, calming her down and urging her to go downstairs while the others continue the interrogation. The corporal orders Wner to be hanged and mercilessly beats him, trying to extract information about the number of soldiers inside the church. Unable to bear the brutality, Ed attempts to stop Ford but is struck in the face. Wanting no further part in the violence, Ed leaves to join Khloe downstairs, all while the sounds of Ford's relentless interrogation echo through the house. Eventually, Ford announces that the church is guarded by around 40 soldiers, reinforcing their need to stick to the plan despite being outnumbered 10-1. At dawn, Chase heads to the attic to untie Wner, assuming the officer has succumbed to his injuries. However, the photographer soldier is too complacent. Wner was only feigning death, waiting for the right moment to strike. Seizing Chase's gun, the Nazi shoots him multiple times. Hearing the shots, Ed rushes upstairs. Taking advantage of Wafner's disorientation from the bag over his head, Ed attacks him, and the team manages to subdue their prisoner. Meanwhile, Chase collapses, bleeding out and nearing death. Remembering how the Germans had revived corpses using the mysterious serum in the lab, Ed injects Chase with it. To everyone's shock, Chase comes back to life almost instantly. However, within moments, Chase is overcome by an unnatural thirst and begins displaying inhuman strength. His body grotesquely contorts, his bones snapping as he mutates further. Wner watches in satisfaction, remarking that the Thousand-Year Reich requires thousand-year soldiers. It becomes evident that the serum transforms the dead into zombie-like super soldiers, part of the Nazis' plan to secure victory in the war. As Chase continues losing his humanity, he turns on his comrades, attacking them with monstrous strength. Realizing their friend is now a threat, Ford shoots Chase in the back, but the bullets have no effect. In a final, desperate move, Ed strikes the reanimated soldier from behind with his rifle, then, driven by emotion, smashes Chase's head into a bloody pulp, killing him for good. Amid the chaos, Wner seizes the opportunity to escape unnoticed. Moments later, the sound of approaching German soldiers fills the air. Wner grabs Paul, using him as a human shield to prevent Ed and the others from firing. Ford gives chase, but outside, he is ambushed by armed Nazis, triggering a fierce gunfight. The Americans manage to eliminate most of the enemy forces, but Wner escapes with only a grazing wound that disfigures his face. Realizing the German army is now fully aware of their presence, Ford insists they proceed with their mission to destroy the radio tower immediately. However, Ed refuses, arguing that they must rescue Paul first. Surprisingly, Tibbet, who usually shows little patience for the boy, sides with Ed and volunteers to help Khloe retrieve her brother. Recognizing the futility of further debate, Ford begrudgingly agrees to alter the plan, free Paul, destroy the lab, and then blow up the tower. Meanwhile, Wner reaches the laboratory and injects himself with multiple doses of the serum in a desperate attempt to numb the pain from his injuries. The scientist warns that the serum has never been tested on living subjects, and the effects could be catastrophic. But it is too late. Wner undergoes a monstrous transformation. Meanwhile, Jacob and Tibbet split off to create a distraction, drawing enemy attention while Ford, Ed, and Khloe infiltrate the lab to complete their objectives. Khloe's first move is to lure a lone motorcyclist onto a bridge. The unsuspecting Nazi motorcyclist pursued Khloe, attempting to overpower her, but Ed and Ford intervened just in time. They quickly subdued him, binding and gagging him before sending him back toward the German checkpoint. However, the officer in charge grew suspicious and attempted to remove the tape from the captive's mouth, a fatal mistake. Hidden inside was a live grenade, which detonated upon removal, causing massive casualties. As reinforcements rushed to secure the checkpoint, Jacob and Tibbet launched a relentless assault, using every weapon at their disposal. While the two heroes drew enemy fire and led the Germans into a chase, the rest of the team slipped into the lab through the sewers. Determined to find her brother as quickly as possible, Khloe split from Ford and Ed. Along the way, she encountered two German soldiers. She executed one to intimidate the other into cooperating, forcing him to lead her to a cell where Paul was supposedly being held. However, it was a trap. Inside the cell was a zombie. Meanwhile, Ford infiltrated the radio room, eliminated the Nazi operating the controls, and sent Ed to assist Khloe. Ed arrived just in time to save her, and the zombie ended up devouring the treacherous soldier instead. Together, Khloe and Ed discovered the room where Jacob had been held and finally found Paul. Khloe and Paul attempted to escape through the sewers, but a zombie grabbed her by the hair and dragged her back. Struggling to break free, she managed to shoot the creature and flee, but it continued to pursue her. Eventually, she found a flamethrower and incinerated the monster. Meanwhile, Paul stumbled out of the church and into the midst of a raging firefight between the Germans and Jacob and Tibbet. Seeing the boy in danger, Tibbet rushed to shield him, taking a serious wound in the process. As he carried Paul to safety, Khloe arrived and eliminated the remaining German soldiers, allowing the group to retreat to the village and await the others. Elsewhere, Ed was ambushed by a German scientist who pressed a gun to the back of his head. Reacting swiftly, Ed evaded the shot and attacked the scientist. During the struggle, the scientist grabbed a scalpel, but Ed turned it against him, stabbing it directly into his heart. At the same time, Ford planted explosives, but Wner, now transformed into an impossibly strong, near indestructible monster, sneaked up behind him. Wner brutally beat Ford and impaled him on a hook, leaving him to suffer in unimaginable agony. Ed returned to the lab and found Wner standing over Ford, who remained hanging from the hook. Ed fired at Wner, but the monstrous officer shrugged off the bullets and launched a vicious attack. Wner then unleashed a horde of undead soldiers by opening the morgue chambers, revealing his plan to raise an unstoppable Nazi army. Summoning incredible willpower, Ford pulled himself off the hook and injected himself with the serum. Now enhanced, he impaled Wner with a metal pipe and challenged him to a monstrous duel. As the battle escalated, Ford pushed an oxygen tank toward Wner, signaling Ed to shoot it. The resulting explosion stunned Wner momentarily. Understanding the stakes, Ford made the ultimate sacrifice to ensure the mission's success. He shoved Ed out of the lab and locked the door behind him, urging him to destroy everything inside. With no time to waste, Ed triggered the explosives and escaped as Ford prepared for a final stand. Surrounded by Wner and the undead soldiers, Ford detonated the charges, obliterating himself and the Nazi experiments in a fiery explosion. Shortly after, the Allied invasion of Normandy began, forcing the Germans into retreat. Ed, along with the injured Jacob and Tibbet, recuperated at a nearby camp. During a debriefing, Ed lied, claiming there were no underground laboratories, ensuring that the horrors they witnessed would never be repeated. Determined to keep such monstrous experiments buried forever, he concealed the truth from military officials. Later, Ed informed his comrades that they had been reassigned to another unit. Despite his wounds, Tibbet joked that he wouldn't rest until he put a bullet in Hitler's head. The Nazi experiments were designed to create an unbeatable army, but at what cost? Even if such horrors provided an advantage in war, could any victory truly be justified if it demanded such extreme measures? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more content. See you in the next one.